While most Americans today are wondering how Trump's sweeping victory will affect them economically, politically, on this ministry, we're discussing how it will align with biblical end-time prophecies, or maybe even cause some of them to be fulfilled. Now that he's won, how does Trump fit into the prophetic timeline of events such as the Pact for the Future and the globalists, such as Israel, TwoState Solution, building of the Third Temple, such as civil unrest, World War III, and the opening of the Second Seal? How about economic collapse and famine? And the ever-present rumors that Trump himself will be the Antichrist. Could he be? We'll answer all those questions today. But the overriding prophecy issue is that if the tribulation actually started on October 2nd and 3rd, 2024, with the ongoing strengthening of the Daniel 9:27 covenant, then in 3.5 years, hell comes to earth. Satan and his fallen angels are cast down, and the Antichrist is revealed by sitting in the temple of God. That would make this the last U.S. presidential election with any meaning at all. Let that sink in. Let me say it again. That would make this the last U.S. presidential election. So where we are on the biblical timeline makes all the difference on what will happen in the next 4 years. If we're correct about the tribulation having had begun, that places Donald J. Trump right in the middle of the most prophetic period in biblical history. And as Romans 13, 1-7 tells us, everyone in authority is placed there by God. So for good or for judgment, God chose Trump for this moment in time and permitted him to be president. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and if you're new to this channel, this whole idea that the 70th week of Daniel or the tribulation, that it already started, is just shocking to you, I'm sure. We have a whole series of videos on this topic. But this previous popular video will summarize and answer the 8 toughest questions you would have about this idea. I know you must have questions about this, and it answers them. And a link to that video is going to be found at the end of this one. Now, I have to admit, I was personally surprised Trump was victorious. Not that he might not have support, but I kind of imagined that shenanigans of one sort or another would impact the decision. But obviously, so far they did not. Globalists like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, their financial backers, the deep state, had less impact, it appears, than many of us thought. Or maybe they were actually backing Trump. We don't know, and probably won't know. But for this video, we'll assume they were simply ineffective at defeating the popular wave that was Trump. So let's start with the biggest prophetic issue. What impact will Trump have on the United Nations Pact for the Future and its strengthening, which is the move to the two-state solution for Israel? This is Daniel 9:27, after all, in our opinion, and the likely start of a tribulation. The answer is that if this truly was the covenant with the many from Daniel, and if the strengthening or prevailing of that covenant happening right now are God's sign that the tribulation began, nothing at all, not even Donald Trump, will stop that. God's will for the next 7 years, maybe the final years of man's rule, is supreme. Now first, the Pact for the Future is the most powerful secular covenant in world history, and it's already approved. The Trump administration could potentially challenge or slow the implementation of it here in the United States. This is a very good thing for the people who live here, by the way, slowing down issues like climate change, global governance, diversity, equity, and inclusion. All those things only help the people here. But the main prophetic impact of the pact, remember, is on Israel. It's not here. We know from Daniel 9:27 that a he shall cause the covenant to be strengthened over the many, or to prevail over the many, for a period of 7 years. The he, whoever that is working behind the scenes to put the new powers given the UN to work to force a false peace covenant on Israel, one that will almost certainly divide the land. So what impact will Trump have on that? Because that's really a key. The division of Israel was initiated by Trump in his first term. Trump's 2020 Middle East peace plan, known as the Deal of the Century, proposed a vision for peace that would create a sovereign Palestinian state. The plan also proposed that Jerusalem would remain undivided and the capital of Israel. So it was kind of a balanced plan. Trump would like to complete what he started. So under Trump, the plan should probably only pick up steam rather than being slowed down. Prior to the election, Trump actually called Netanyahu to tell him he expected the prime minister to end the Middle East war before Trump takes office. There was a mild threat involved in that call. This, in our mind, is a step to fast track the two-state solution. Trump's impact in this whole thing will likely only accelerate this prophecy. Some will ask, is Trump or his son-in-law Jared Kushner the he that strengthened the covenant? Some think so. We'll discuss that a little more in a moment. But first, we know that the day after 4 recent solar eclipses in 2017, 2023, and 2 in 2024 all resulted in meetings the day after between the Saudis and the USA about the two-state solution. The last one, of course, had 90 nations involved, not just those two. Think what an incredible coincidence that is. The next solar eclipse is scheduled for March 29th, 2025. And the day after that is Nisan 1, the first day of the Hebraic religious year, exactly 6 biblical months since the tribulation began, if we're correct. Now, we're not saying the dividing of the land of Israel will take place on that day, but it is certainly a date, March 30th, that I'm going to circle on my calendar, and you might as well. Now, a component of that agreement might also be an expansion of what we used to call the Abraham Accords. Haven't talked about them much lately. They started under Trump too. Several Arab countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, normalized relations with Israel through them. Certainly Saudi Arabia might join, and Jordan might as well, if the two-state solution happens. And if you didn't notice from a map, these countries are all south of Israel. This would divide the Muslim nations of the Middle East into sort of a northern group, not aligned with Israel, and a southern group that is. Will this set up a king of the north and king of the south antagonism between rival segments of the Muslim world as prophesied in Daniel 11? It might. And it might explain who is in and who isn't in the Gog of Magog alliance. We think all these things are possible, and we're going to explain them in future episodes. The peace deal will also likely include what you've been waiting to hear about, which is giving Israel the right to begin sacrifices on the Temple Mount, the very sacrifices the Antichrist will take away at the midpoint of a tribulation. It might also give Israel accommodations to either build a temple or have partial use of the Dome of the Rock as a temple or set up a tabernacle tent. Trump is uniquely positioned to assist this effort. Remember, he's the one the Israelis placed on the Cyrus coin, equating Trump with the Persian King Cyrus. They did this because of his moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. However, Cyrus is best known for permitting the Jews returning from Persia to rebuild the temple. Will this also be Trump's fate? Will he help Israel with their efforts to have a third temple, begin sacrifices? Can you imagine if that happens, what that will mean about whether the tribulation has started or not? It will likely change a lot of people's minds. And we're going to find out pretty soon. So the biblical year, from the Feast of Trumpets 2024 to the Feast of Trumpets 2025, is a year of peace during the beginning of the tribulation. But the next year, the one after that, is likely the moment when the second seal breaks and the red horse rides. We know this begins with ethnic groups rising against ethnic groups. Nation against nation is the way our English Bibles usually record it. Could Trump's proposed mass deportation of immigrants lead to the type of civil unrest that this seal envisions? Mass deportation efforts often create widespread fear within, immigrant communities and among their allies, and their supporters might just try to stop this, deepening, the already existing divide that we have in our cities. And enforcing a mass deportation policy, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, it's going to require extensive law enforcement resources. Officers who are deporting aren't protecting, so lawlessness might ensue. It could be just a moment like that that sparks all kind of civil unrest. In addition, the financial bubble in America has to burst sometime as well. And we know from Matthew 24:7 and the third seal of Revelation that the economic collapse happens before the midpoint of a tribulation. So, if we're in the tribulation, then those things are scheduled to happen on Trump's watch. Might policies of extreme tariffs create a trade war, and combined with his deportation policies that reduce the workforce, could all this drive up wages and limit supplies and lead to some kind of economic catastrophe? Too early to tell, but the famines of Matthew 24:7 are scheduled during the Trump presidency, if we're right about the tribulation. This brings us to the issue of whether or not Trump is the Antichrist. Certainly, he's made a lot of enemies, which has led to 3 unsuccessful assassination attempts. We know the man of sin faces his own assassination attempt and that he's miraculously healed from it. It's that healing that seems to launch the Antichrist's career. So, Trump is a potential to have something like that happen. A number of religious leaders and theologians, have speculated that Trump's character aligns with the characteristics of the Antichrist as well. Their concern generally revolve around Trump's personality traits and his actions, which they argue echo traits of the man of lawlessness. Reverend John Pavlitz, pastor and writer, had this to say: "If you could somehow conceive of the Antichrist as being one who claims to represent God while doing the exact opposite, then yes, there are certain parallels to be drawn with him and Trump." Reverend William Barber, a social justice leader, warned about the moral implications of following Trump without question, saying, "When you claim to love Jesus and act completely opposite to his teachings, you are at risk of deceiving millions." So these guys are obviously on the other side from Trump. But, even some that are on his side, like Michael Brown, had this to say: there is a real danger when people begin to look to any political leader as a savior. And I couldn't agree more. So, if Trump is able to achieve a false peace in the Middle East and begin construction of the third temple in Israel, a lot of Israelis are going to view him as a Messiah figure as well. However, there's only one way someone can truly be the Antichrist, and that's to sit in the temple of God and declare himself to be God. Prior to that, everything we have to say about this is speculation. The sitting in the temple is God's sign. It's how the Antichrist is revealed, and until that happens, everything else isn't really worth talking about. Finally, the question arises if the deep state will even allow Trump to serve as president. I'm sure you've heard that term, deep state. It refers to a supposed group of entrenched, non-elected elements within the government, especially in intelligence, defense, regulatory sectors, places like that. that try to influence or counter policies from elected officials. If they truly exist, they think they run the government. The Justice Department, CIA, FBI are all thought to be deep state by many. Others like me think they could actually be at the beck and call of the globalist interests. Now, individuals or groups within the government or allied with it might challenge executive actions of Trump in court, leverage legal procedures against him that could take months or years to resolve. There might be whistleblowers who come forward with true or false accusations that launch all sorts of inspector general investigations, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, there's the risk of assassination. John F. Kennedy is thought by some to have been eliminated by these same factions. So, in all of these areas, Trump is going to have his hands full, unlike any president maybe in history. But whether Trump actually serves a full term or not, what really demands our full attention is whether or not the tribulation actually began on October 2nd and 3rd, 2024. Nothing could be more important prophetically right now than that. Was the pact for the future the covenant? And is the effort by the international coalition of 90 nations to force Israel to divide their land the strengthening of that covenant? All prophesied in that verse. And do these events match up with the symbols of the white horseman that signify that the first seal of Revelation was opened? Click right here to keep watching and get your toughest questions about the tribulation answered. Where is the Antichrist in all of this? Why isn't the peace deal already signed? And 6 other questions just like that. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.